Trout Unlimited's mission, very simply, is to conserve, protect, and restore North America's cold water fisheries and their watersheds. And so, the northern San Juans certainly fit into that, as well as, countless other priority watersheds in the state. We complete this work at Trout Unlimited a few ways. So there's TU National, there's state staff, and then there's local chapter staff that support more localized projects. So the national staff is broken out into the Eastern and Western water and habitat programs, as well as a national umbrella of the Angler Conservation Alliance. And so for us, I work under the Western Water and Habitat Program, and our chief focus is implementation of projects that have direct, measurable impacts to habitat, water quality, water quantity, for the benefit of the fishery, aquatic ecology, and the community that rely on those resources for recreation, angling, or for livelihoods. The Angler Conservation Alliance, their chief focus is really to support local, state, and federal legislation for programmatic work towards TU's mission. So the most common projects that I work on in our Colorado Abandoned Minelands program, I'm a project manager for that small group of project managers in this state. So what we most commonly work on is the remediation of acidification of mine waste rocks, tailings materials, dredging materials from legacy mining operations. And really, chiefly, it's the erosion of these sediments have large impacts on water quality, as well as some of the discharge from these mines can have compounding effects on water quality and the organisms that comprise the adjacent streams. So that's our main focus in our abandoned minelands program, and that's really we're focused on trying to make some measurable changes in the northern San Juans and throughout the state for that matter. So how do we address them? So commonly, reclamation involves many alternatives. It's very site specific. If it's a Forest Service, or it could be a private property where we collaborate with EPA, or a private organization or agency oversight, but we'll elect kind of the best choices. So you could think of it as similar to like a NEPA work, where you present several alternatives, and then you, along with the public and this agency, can move forward with that. So with the chosen alternatives. So really our focus is to minimize weathering of the target material that we're after to improve water quality. So again, that could be mine waste, waste rock dumps, dredge mines, and then we want to really focus on minimizing the mobilization of that material into the adjacent streams and groundwater networks. That's a big point that we really focused on. And then lastly, vaguely speaking, to minimize environmental and human health hazards by consolidating, burying in a repository, or relocating material offsite where it's exposed to less weather. How can the community help address them? So my biggest recommendation is to get involved in the watershed groups and organizations like Riverwatch, UWP, local Trout Unlimited chapter, any other volunteer efforts. Become engaged and involved in those local and regional happenings. A lot of projects that we work on with any agency is subject to a 30-day public comment period. And so I would encourage, any and all of you to kind of be on the lookout for those. I know that historically they're kind of hard to find, but regardless, that's a good way for your voice to be heard and for you to kind of have an input on some of these projects if you so desire. So that would be kind of my big point that you can have an impact on. So How does water conservation fit into your activities? And then again, how can community members help with water conservation? And so this one's tough. There's a lot of really probably good answers. I keyed in on three main points. But I think importantly, conservation can be many different things for lots of people. You know, it's each person can have their own unique take on it. And I think that's part of what's great about it. But my three would be the historic significance around a lot of the mining sites that we work at. So we deal a lot with historic preservation and, like Forest Service district archaeologists, regional archaeologists, in preservation of the historic value of some of these structures or implements at these sites. So, and this is again happening on both public and private property. So that's something that the community can be involved in. And that's an important aspect of our job, is kind of respecting that and making time for that. As TU and a lot of other organizations really emphasize, the conservation of native species. This comes up maybe less often in my day-to-day than I would prefer. I really think that the conservation and promotion of habitat for the conservation or reintroduction of native species deserves a little bit more stage time or discussion. But I think that it's an important component of conservation, and people really enjoy and kind of engage in that. So, and that doesn't necessarily just have to be trout. That can be warm water species as well. So, community contributions was my third point. Volunteer if you have spare time. Again, this can be river cleanups, planting events with Trout Unlimited or UWP. A lot of watershed groups engage in planting events. It's a cost-effective way to have an impact on the resource and to improve habitat conditions. So there's another outfit that I was recently reintroduced to that's called Science on the Fly, and it's kind of a collaboration between Fish Pond, the angling company, and this watershed group out of the East Coast, and they're really trying to get citizens involved in continuous water quality monitoring. So Science on the Fly, that's another cool one that I've seen recently. And lastly, fourth question was, what is important for people to know about remediation of pollutant sources in our watershed? In the San Juans, the background geology plays a significant role in our water quality conditions. And I think that we actively work to continue to improve them. And we think that incremental changes are important for water quality and long-term conditions. But I think that it's important for public and the community as a whole to remember that it's having a larger role in the long-term goals than maybe we give it credit for. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is just where you're located and what some of the natural happenings in your area, how that dictates your surroundings. So and then secondly, the remediation of water quality issues is often a slow, drawn out process. And while I would love to have things transpire more quickly, sometimes it's to the benefit of the projects and ultimately the community to have some of these projects really go through all the paces. In some instances, it's drawn out maybe too much, but I think general support of the fact that some of these benchmarks are put in place to ensure that when the work is done and the money is spent on these projects, that it's done, that the target goals are reached. And so I think just to really sum up that point, just keep that in mind, that these things take time, and it can be painful, but it's for good reason. So I think what's been impressive to me about our organization, TU, is kind of the breadth of projects that TU is undertaking, whether it's on the local, state, or national level. I think that there's a lot happening. In Colorado alone, we have 24 chapters. Those chapters engage in multiple different projects, and some of them leverage significant funding to help contribute to some of the projects that I lead or that my colleagues lead. And so I think that what's impressive to me is just how, like, the community in and of itself, of the way not only TU is structured, but just through these collaborations, just how much positive work can get done. And again, I think that I think it takes a while, and it takes some patience, but that's been one of my biggest take homes, is that through these networks of people and projects and multi-tiers of organizations, there's a lot of really cool things happening, and innovation and restoration, and so I think it's really great. And I think the only thing I would add is just the challenge is always to keep people engaged in that, and actively interested in that. And so I'm not sure what the answer ultimately is, but I think just this type of project, just trying to get the word out that this is happening in your watershed, and these are the folks that are doing it, and here's how you can contribute, is a great way to kind of kickstart that.